There we go.
There we go.
Good day, sir.
Hi there.
Oh,
Oh,
There we go.
there we go.
yo, we have options.
This is the best option. This is as good as I look. So thanks for your patience.
Oh, thank you. Just let you know, you've got the best of Cloverdale with you right now, plus the guy from Vancouver that we've let in for the day. But without further ado, because we do have a big crowd waiting for us, why don't I just get started if everybody's ready to go? What I'll do is you'll see a number of faces here. I will, after each of us, like after I'm finished speaking, I'll make myself go away because I'm not the person you came to see today. The same will be true for the rest of our speakers, except for Kirk and Mr. O'Toole will be the two faces you see until the end. So anyway, without further ado, I just want to introduce myself, Scott Wheatley, Executive Director of the Cloverdale District Chamber of Commerce. And I want to thank you all today for joining our coffee and conversation with the Honorable Erin O'Toole, Leader of the Opposition. Also joining us today, and you can't see them, but they're there, is Councillor Laurie Guerrera from the City of Surrey, Stephanie Cadu, the MLA for South Surrey, Tamara Jansen, the Member of Parliament for Langley Cloverdale. We have Carrie Lynn Findlay, the Member of Parliament from South Surrey White Rock, Taco Van Popta, the Member of Parliament from Langley Aldergrove, and the Honourable Yona Martin from the Senate of Canada. And I'd also like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is in the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen First Nations. And now I would like to welcome our MC for today, Kirk Lapointe, Editor-in-Chief of BIV Media Group, Vice President Editorial for Glacier Media, and Adjunct Professor at UBC. And one last thing is, if you guys would like to select speaker view, it's one of the buttons in your right, and then you'll be able to focus on who's speaking. Anyway, over to you, Kirk.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks very much. Real privilege to be here today. Wish we were all, of course, there in person, but you know, we're all surviving quite well on Zoom and getting a lot of business done. A lot of really good discussion done on Zoom, and we'll of course have a great discussion today for this hour. I want to start really though off with a little bit of introduction of other people to get them involved. I want to allow first of all Adam Smith to say a few words on behalf of our sponsors today, Uptown Business Machines and Kyocera.
Oh, thank you, Kirk. I appreciate it. Welcome, Mr. O'Toole. I want to just say a couple words. As proud partners of the Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce, we're so happy to be here and sponsor of the discussion, coffee and conversation with the Honorable Erin O'Toole. We are at a crucial time for business and indeed all Canadian citizens. Our world as we know it has changed, and we need to have stability. Business seeks stability. And Uptown Business Machines partners with known manufacturers, Kyocera Document Solutions, and Microsoft are here to provide reliable, ongoing, trusted service. And as part of our program is getting involved in chamber events just like this and being advocates for business and advocates for business communication. So without further ado, we want to pass it back to Mr. Lapointe, and we're so honored and pleased to have you here, Mr. O'Toole.
Thanks a lot, Adam. Of course, and thanks for the support from Uptown Business Machines and Kyocera for today's event. I want to also allow Vice President and Advocacy Chair of the Cloverdale District Chamber of Commerce, Rebecca Smith, now to say a few words. Rebecca.
Thank you, Kirk. It is my honor to serve the Cloverdale and District Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about what the Cloverdale Chamber offers in the coffee and conversation meetings. It is part of our advocacy committee initiative to represent in a nonpartisan way, but specifically the membership and the community of Cloverdale, Clayton, and Campbell Heights and our district. We, as part of that, provide this opportunity in a relatively informal way for our members and the community to have direct access to talk to and communicate with elected representatives, as well as bureaucracies and stakeholders. That's our method and our madness here in order to afford that communication to be both ways. We limit the time of one directional conversation, and we ask for a dialogue. So we have put together questions from our members, and they are directly from the members, not from the chamber, to our elected representative, in this case, Mr. O'Toole, to make sure that we get the answers that people are looking for. So that's our purpose. We ask that those who are joining us today remember that and join us for future coffee and conversations with other individuals that affect our community and our businesses. And we hope that the discussion today helps you in your understanding of Mr. O'Toole, his party, and get you the answers that we want. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rebecca. So we're going to get our show on the road here. I want to introduce our guest speaker for today, the Honourable Erin O'Toole, Leader of the Official Opposition of Canada and the Conservative Party. Official Opposition. And Mr. O'Toole, of course, served in the Royal Canadian Air Force. He worked as a corporate lawyer, I believe a Bay Street lawyer, if I'm not mistaken, before being elected as a member of Parliament for Durham in Ontario. It's just east of Toronto, for those of you who don't know the geography there. In 2012, he served as Minister of Veterans Affairs from 2015 to 2019. In August 2020, he was elected. Actually, he couldn't have served as Minister of Veterans Affairs from 2015 to 2019. That's not possible.
For 1 year, sadly.
I didn't realize you were a Trudeau in the first Trudeau cabinet. Okay, sorry about that. Someone got that wrong. 2011 to 2015, am I right? Am I close there? 2012
Just
to
2015, sadly. I wasn't even elected in 2011, but 2012, I was elected.
This is off to a great start. So there we go.
COVID start.
However, I think I have this right. In August 2020, you were elected leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and became the leader of the opposition. So there we are. We're back on track. Mr. O'Toole is going to share his remarks. We're giving him about 5 to 8 minutes to set the stage for us. And then, of course, we're going to have the question and answer forum from members of the chamber. So let's get, the mistakes are all out of the way now. It's going to be perfect for the balance of 50 minutes. Over to you, sir.
Well, it's over to me. I can't promise perfection, but thank you very much, Kirk. Thank you, Scott, Adam, Rebecca. I'm happy to be here with you for coffee and conversation. Obviously, I can't have a coffee, but let's have a conversation. When I was 13, I took the train from Toronto to Vancouver with my grandfather to see Expo 86. And that was when my love for British Columbia began. So I wish I was with you today. 5 years after Expo 86, I was back, not far from where you are, as a young high school grad doing my boot camp in the Canadian Armed Forces at CFB Chilliwack. And then later on, I got to the island and did some training at Comox. But the true highlight of the times when I could travel to British Columbia was actually 2010, when I joined my wife in Vancouver for a month. She worked incredibly hard on the Olympics at the International Broadcast Center with CTV. I was the lucky husband with tickets, including seeing Alexandre Bilodeau win the first Canadian gold medal on Canadian soil at Cyprus. BC, your province made Canada incredibly proud. You hosted, I think, the best Winter Games ever. And I really have enjoyed every time I've gotten to interact with folks on the ground in British Columbia. And I'm very proud of my BC caucus, including Tamara, who are strong advocates. So it's great to be here for the conversation portion virtually to discuss the ways I think we can partner with your chamber and businesses in Cloverdale on Canada's economic recovery after the pandemic. As leader of the opposition, I have a job to do to hold the Liberal government to account, to oppose, to challenge. And with COVID cases rising, the third wave, greater restrictions across the country, including a new wave in British Columbia, we're all frustrated to see Canada fall behind the United States, the UK, and other developed countries on vaccine deployment. Canada used to be a leader, but I fear that under Mr. Trudeau, we've become consistently a laggard. Canada deserves better. We deserve leadership. We need to see the return of Canadian optimism and Canadian ingenuity. But most of all, we need to see that leadership and ethical planning for our country's future return. because our country is really at a crossroads in this third wave. Which path do we want to take going forward? A path being offered of spending away a future and hollowing out our private sector economy, or a path to a certain future that secures a strong future for all Canadians? A month ago, I introduced Canada's recovery plan, our plan to secure a stronger future for Canada. Canada's Conservatives will enact a comprehensive jobs plan to recover the 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic within 1 year, and we won't stop there. We're going to have specific measures to take action in the hardest hit sectors, including help to many of those that have suffered the most: small business owners, women entrepreneurs, and young people. We will have plans based on rebuilding main streets from Cloverdale to Bowmanville, my community, and assist small businesses through incentives to invest in, rebuild, or start new businesses. The second pillar of our recovery plan, we will enact the strictest accountability and transparency laws in Canada's history. After multiple ethics scandals, from WE to SNC-Lavalin, we have to restore faith of Canadians in their national institutions and in their government. And after having a prime minister who's now subject to his third ethical investigation, we need to show that public service is about service for the country, not for a small group. Third, this last year deepened Canada's mental health crisis. Families and communities across the country are struggling. All families have been impacted. We will introduce a Canada Mental Health Action Plan and boost funding partnerships with the provinces and with nonprofit groups on the ground in communities for mental wellness and healthcare. Our fourth pillar is to ensure that our country is never unprepared for a crisis again. We will make Canada more resilient, reduce our reliance on foreign actors like Communist China, and take seriously our responsibility to protect the health of Canadians with domestic capacity in vaccines and other critical medicines. Our fifth and final pillar is a Conservative government will secure our long-term economy by getting the budget back into balance over the course of the next decade. We supported spending during the pandemic to protect Canadians, but I think we all know we cannot pass unsustainable debt to our children and future generations. The Liberals recently introduced their budget after 2 years without a budget. And now we know the emergency spending in response to COVID-19 was actually just the beginning of more spending for the Liberal government. They don't seem to have any plan to end that growing spending. The spending in their budget is actually so astronomical, it puts the future of the country at risk. It puts growth at risk. It puts healthcare and programs we rely on at risk, particularly if we see inflation and interest rates increase. Mr. Trudeau has doubled our debt and doesn't seem to care. In fact, you look at the forecast, he's rounding second and heading for a triple, on track to triple the national debt. This is recklessness. So our plan is once the recovery starts, we will get spending under control while securing the revenue needed through a private sector-led recovery to pay for the services Canadians depend on. Recently as well, I was very proud to release the Conservative plan for climate change. The Liberal approach has traditionally been big government taxing consumers and phasing out many jobs when we need them the most. The Conservative approach will empower Canadians, reduce emissions, while preserving jobs and economic activity in all sectors and all regions. In fact, I'm very proud we had a BC-based set of climate experts model and verify that the Conservative climate change plan will meet the same emission reductions as the Liberal government's plan, put us on track to make our Paris targets, but will grow our economy and investment in jobs dramatically more than the Trudeau government's plan. The decisions we take in the next few years on climate change, on our economic recovery, will actually define Canada for the next generation. That's the crossroads I was referring to. And as the father of two, My greatest worry is that we don't take the path that secures a bright and prosperous future for our children and grandchildren. So that's what drives me, and I'm sure that's what drives you. As we recover from COVID-19, I sincerely believe it's time for certainty and competent leadership. It's time for an ethical leader who is in it for you. Our recovery plan will get the economy back on track in Cloverdale and in all parts of our country to secure a strong future post-COVID. Thank you again, and I'm looking forward to the conversation and the coffee next time when I can get there on the ground.
Great. Thanks so much, Mr. O'Toole. I'm going to invoke executive intervention here, and I'm reminded, as you started your remarks, of the Olympics in 2010. Before I forget, because I'm an old guy now, I forget things very quickly. I want to ask you, they're gearing up maybe for another bid. Should British Columbia go after the 2030 games?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I've hinted at this. I don't think that. I think we should put forward a bid to replace Beijing and host a portion of the Winter Games here. We have the facilities, and as you know, we passed a motion recognizing that a genocide is taking place in Xinjiang province of China. And I personally don't think that we should participate knowing that is going on in the host country. So perhaps there's a chance for it to be even sooner, but I'll tell you, I got to see several of the venues. I got to experience it as my wife and her team was working incredibly hard. I got to see firsthand just what an incredible games that there were in the GVR and in Whistler. So the faster you can do it again in a fiscally responsible manner, I'm all in favor of.
All right, great. Now, let's deal right away with fiscal responsibility. As you alluded to, it's no great secret out there. There's a deficit, there's a growing debt. And you've basically said you want to bring it back. You want to bring it back to a balanced budget at some point. And one of our members wanted to ask, will any such plan include cost cutting, tax increases? Where are the services, the taxes? How are you identifying them already?
Absolutely. The fifth pillar of our recovery plan is our plan back to fiscal balance. It is a decade-long plan so that we don't have to have cuts coming out of COVID. In fact, I've said you have to run a deficit during a crisis like this. We have supported emergency spending. In fact, we often voted for programs, whether it's the wage subsidy or rent supports, knowing the programs were flawed, but we wanted the money to get out the door quickly, and then we worked hard to fix them. Our issue with Mr. Trudeau is he doesn't seem to believe in the private sector. I do. Your members, small and medium-sized businesses, 2/3 of Canadians work for a small or medium-sized enterprise. If we have a wave of insolvencies or bankruptcies, we will see also chronic unemployment. The solution to that is not to create the CERB forever, the UBI, as the Liberals just voted on at their convention. In fact, the provincial government in BC just confirmed that the UBI is not going to help the vulnerable and actually is unsustainable. What we need to do is help small business in the short term. That's what I said. Our plan for saving Main Street, supporting small businesses will be a focus. But as well, working with larger sectors, I've had great meetings with the BC Forestry Council, for example. We need a softwood lumber agreement. We need certainty, and we need a government that is proud of the sustainability measures being done, whether it's in forestry or whether in energy, and tries not to shut it down, but work with them to reduce their emission, their carbon intensity, work with them to increase an already growing area of Indigenous participation in resource economies, and be proud of what we do, whether you're getting up early to open your business in Cloverdale or you're getting up early in Fort McMurray. There's value in that, and it's core to the wellness of the families and the communities impacted. So rather than picking or choosing which jobs Canadians should have, which Mr. Trudeau has consistently done, talking about transitioning, talking about manufacturing being in the past in Ontario, for example, we need all cylinders running so that we grow the economy, in a way that we can reduce our spending in a way that's manageable, and then work with the provinces to make sure that we buttress up areas of critical need, particularly seniors and health. So there will be new investments needed, but we feel the 10-year timeline is reasonable so that there's no cuts needed, provided we can really kickstart that economic growth.
Okay. As you know, one of the things that was under some study pre-budget and may still be under study has to do with capital gains on principal residences. And one of our questioners is asking, are you committed to retaining the capital gains exemption on principal residences?
Absolutely. We will fight tooth and nail to stop the creep of the Liberal government towards eliminating that important element of the savings and retirement for the vast majority of Canadians. In fact, there's been a stealth campaign here where many of the Liberal MPs have talked about it, but using CRA and using CMHC, where there's a study underway right now, they are looking at eliminating or changing that long-standing exemption. And if you look at their spending forecast, Kirk, you see they are going to raise taxes on Canadians to try and get a handle on this. In fact, the day after their budget, the governor of the Bank of Canada warned about interest rates going up next year. So Mr. Trudeau is already committing to such massive spending, in addition to what happened in COVID, that in the next couple of years, 40, 50, $80 billion will be needed just to service the new debt he's putting on. So that will put at pressure increases to fix gaps in long-term care and healthcare. That will put at risk programs that Canadians rely on. So sometimes being responsible with the finances is actually securing that. So I would like the Liberals, we asked them to put in the budget a clear denunciation of that encroachment on the home equity that people have, that they rely on, and they've so far refused to do that.
What about even the compromise position that some are already pointing to, which is the idea that perhaps in the first 5 years of your ownership of a property, there would be a sliding scale in terms of how much of a capital gain you would receive? Is even that a non-negotiable for you?
I believe so, yes, because here's the reality, and I'm a GTA member of Parliament, and so after the GVR, after the Lower Mainland, the next highest growth housing market is my region. We have to recognize that is not the case in all parts of the country, and that has always been the challenge with an Ottawa knows best approach in terms of mortgage stress tests and other things. In some areas of the country, there hasn't been such dramatic growth, and there's been flat wage growth too, outside of some of our large urban sectors. So I think that important element of saving for your retirement, developing a nest egg in your home, that should be yours. And, you know, we're already paying income tax. There's already sales taxes. Mr. Trudeau is tripling his carbon tax. And just in the last week, since we launched a smarter climate change plan than the Liberals, to be frank, he has changed his targets twice in 7 days. So he'll be driving that up further. Canadians are paying more than enough already. We have to have responsibility in Ottawa. So that will be our pledge. And that home, that equity that can be built up, Canadians work hard for that buying of their first home. My wife and I remember when I did it, leaving the military. We should not tamper with that important element of what I'd say is a strong and vibrant middle class.
Yeah, okay. It seems like the goalposts keep shifting on when it is that we're going to be able to emerge out of the pandemic. It's no question. The variants have thrown a new loop in this, the vaccination plans, all of these types of things make it more and more mysterious on when we're going to be able to come to somewhat the end of this. But do you have an idea yet about how, say, your government would ease off, ramp down the various forms of COVID-19 assistance programs that are currently in effect? And do you have even in your own mind, a bit of a timeline on when we ought to be starting to see these even under the Liberal government?
That's a great question, Kirk, and I'm proud to say yes. In fact, the opposition parties have a couple of opposition days every quarter where we can bring a debate to Parliament for an entire day. Well, a month ago, we brought a debate, one of our finite supply of controlling the agenda as opposition, on a safe and data-driven reopening plan. Part of the Trudeau government's failure has been to be 2 or 3 steps behind at every stage of this crisis. We're so reactive, we're so behind. That's why we're not as far ahead on the vaccine rollout, for example. So let's use the time now to work with the private sector, work with the other orders of government to define what a safe and effective reopening is. And then highly affected sectors, and this is what I talk about Main Street or tourism or some of the sectors that will see a prolonged recession because of the nature of COVID. So even when it's safer and there's no more community spread, you're going to see less tourism. So how can we save those highly affected sectors, but reopen as much as normal so we can reduce the wage subsidy and a whole range of other programs? That's what we have to be planning now. We don't plan that when the last vaccine goes into the arms. And I was just reviewing things last night. Mr. Trudeau, in March and April of last year, said that Canada would provide leadership in rapid diagnostic testing and in tracing. He's failed on both of those measures. In fact, we do not have rapid testing even at our borders. There's people crossing the land border not being rapid tested. My nephews who live in the UK have 2 rapid tests in their home every week as part of their going to school. Other countries have been using tools much more effectively. Mr. Trudeau's government approved rapid tests 6 months later than everyone else. So when it comes to reopening, let's plan now to show when vaccination rates, when the ability to safely reopen with sanitation, with mask use, so we can get that opening, get programs that businesses are relying on, ramp them down for the ones that are reopened, and the ones that will have a prolonged, slow recovery, more assistance to make sure that they survive. Because as I said earlier, with 2/3 of Canadians working for an SME, we can't see a bunch of COVID insolvencies or bankruptcies, or we're going to see chronic unemployment. And so we have a jobs plan that's aggressive, and we're going to be announcing some even more bold moves in the coming weeks on this, Kirk.
So if I hear you correctly on this, there should be a series of transmitted milestones and metrics almost right now to let people know essentially what would open the door to something.
Yes.
Something like that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, when I had my first briefing with the health minister and with Dr. Tam, part of what we haven't been giving Canadians is a broader footprint. We hear about case counts, we hear about ICU hospitalizations, and tragically, we hear about deaths. But we aren't tracing and testing to really localize and give people even more information. We've called for a ban of flights from hotspot countries, and after days of pressure, Mr. Trudeau relented last night. We know some of the variants are so risky, we have to take temporary severe action to limit their spread, because the community spread is vastly more dangerous than the first wave. You can't be slow on these decisions, and they have to be made on where are variants out of control, what countries. We have to stop flights until we can have a plan to properly screen at both land borders and to make sure people don't fly from one country to another, then into Canada to avoid the ban. So this is all about metrics, all about data. And it's my time in the private sector, I'd like to see the government being smarter, more metric, more data driven, so that our responses can be faster.
Yeah, I'll ask a personal question here. Again, I'll invoke executive privilege and being able to moderate today. I don't know whether you've had any vaccination yet, but your family. But I want to ask personally, what's going to make you feel safe to go about your life in a normal way again?
There are three critical tools in a pandemic. And I've been saying this for a year. People that have been following my stuff probably are sick of me saying it, but the three tools are vaccines, rapid tests, and information. And sadly, we've been slow on all. Last fall, I said to the government, even though you don't have the supply as quickly as you like, let's have a plan so everybody knows when they can expect their vaccine. Critical care people and the most vulnerable first, so our seniors and nurses, but then we should have had a national approach to essential workers, people on the front lines, truckers. Here's where you're going to get yours. Hey, it may not be till April or May, but sometimes that certainty allows you to make decisions and allows you to know it's coming. Why they were scared to talk about that, I'm not sure. It's likely because they didn't negotiate good contracts to receive the vaccine. And they've, in many cases, the federal government has set up the provinces for failure, because without supply, we are right now as a country only operating at about 50% or so in terms of output of our vaccine capacity. Why is it only at 50% of operating capacity? Because of supply, not because of the BC government or the Ontario government or the Quebec government. It's because of the lack of supply. My own personal situation, Kirk, is interesting. I caught COVID in September as a brand new leader. My first tour out of Ontario, bang, I have COVID, and sadly my wife got it as well. We were very fortunate to have mild experience with it. We are getting the AstraZeneca vaccine tomorrow through our family doc. Their clinic has some, and my wife signed us up. And I've been glad to see this week several of the other party leaders have been doing that. I have full confidence in the efficacy of this vaccine. I worked within healthcare when I was Procter & Gamble's lawyer in Canada. So I know we could have gotten diagnostic tests out faster. And I believe in the safety and efficacy of these peer-reviewed, clinically tested vaccines. And as a public figure, I want people to get vaccinated to understand the effectiveness of this. And I think once we have vaccination levels up, with masking, with sanitation, we can have degrees of safe and data-driven reopening.
Okay. We're going to try to get through as many of these questions as we can here in the time we've got left. So Trans Mountain Pipeline, not been the easiest pipeline to build, as you know. What policies would a conservative federal government take to ensure it's complete?
Well, Kirk, I think you should reveal your conflict of interest, me as well. We both own that pipeline, by the way. So we're talking about something that, because of Mr. Trudeau's complete incompetence, we now publicly own, a pipeline that a few years ago was being built entirely with private sector funds. Why are we in this position? Essentially two reasons. The cancellation of Northern Gateway, that was approved, that was 1/3 owned by Indigenous First Nations along the route. Mr. Trudeau's Bill C-69 also led to the withdrawal of the Energy East option. So Mr. Trudeau, I'm sure he never wanted to buy a pipeline, but his own failed policies backed him into that corner. I've always said we should be proud of what we produce in this country, including our energy. It's the highest environmental, social governance, ESG measures in the world. And I call it ESGI, the Indigenous participation and partnerships coming in energy and in softwood and so many sectors are so important for economic reconciliation. So let's make sure that this national interest, because all of Canada benefits from us getting better world price for a finite supply of energy, let's make sure we have the strongest mitigation measures in the world, including where the terminus of the pipeline is in British Columbia. And the more we can show that this is a project in the national interest, it is safe, effective, there's a benefit for all Canadians, that has to be what we talk about. And the world will be using energy for the next century in a declining way as we have more renewables, as we see less use. But the world should be using ESGI resources, whether it's energy, softwood, rare earth minerals, and EVs. They shouldn't come from regimes or dictatorships. They should come from a country that is completely transparent and is striving to be the best, from human rights right through to emission reduction. So I think Canadians should be proud of what we produce in this country and make sure that we do it as effectively and safely as possible.
Is there anything, though, that can be done in order to accelerate, you think, the pipeline's construction and completion?
I think it is underway now, and that is good. We follow the progress on it very, very carefully. I think if there's any measure that we can bring to accelerate it faster, we will. I've always said that the uncertainty that was out there with Bill C-69 and other things, if you know, our host here tonight, Adam, talked about why business needs certainty. I couldn't agree more. If you have 10, 20 years of regulatory and environmental review and allow these to become captured as really measures to just not get anything done, you're not going to see private sector capital investment, whether it's in a pipeline, whether it's in a new factory, whether it's in the modernization of an existing factory to make it more efficient or less carbon intense. There has to be a fair process for capital investment in Canada. We have to show that you can get things done in this country. That's why we'll be unwinding some of the ideological, really backwards driven decisions of Mr. Trudeau. It sent a signal that Canada's not open for investment. We lost $160 billion in capital investment in Canada before COVID. So I think we're going to try and send a signal that we can be world leaders in ESG and environmental mitigation, but there can be a path to certainty for investments in Canada. Okay.
Let's change the channel a little bit on this one. There was a time when homelessness was really considered to be a Vancouver issue. It's no longer. It is now a British Columbian issue. Many communities are experiencing a rapid growth in homelessness for a variety of reasons. I'd like to get a sense from you about what a Conservative government would be doing differently in order to address homelessness in this country.
That's an important question. I think BC sees it more than others, but this is a problem in all parts of the country, even within steps of Parliament, to be honest. And I think it's always on our mind, how can we tackle it? I'm a firm believer in Ottawa building partnerships with other orders of government and with other organizations. If I learned anything, Kirk, from my time in the military, is that sometimes leadership means partnering or even following. And if you're confident in your own leadership abilities, sometimes taking the lead and following someone else is actually an expression of your own leadership. Because if you're going to get the problem tackled sooner, isn't that what a leader should be looking at doing? Why I say that is, I have no doubt when it comes to this issue or Indigenous reconciliation or other issues like this that are important and should be beyond partisanship. I have no doubt of the sincerity of Mr. Trudeau. I just think he believes in a Ottawa-driven, we know better than everyone else. When if you look at groups like Habitat for Humanity or groups like the Legion, the Rotary Club, faith-based organizations, they've been actually providing supports, social supports, including for homelessness issues and at risk of homelessness, mental health. I want to, with our National Mental Health Action Plan, not just partner with provinces, but with these groups on the ground. They will often know the needs, whether in Cloverdale or in Surrey or where some of what used to be people looked at as Vancouver challenges are now Lower Mainland challenges. Let's sometimes partner with the groups on the ground as a funding partner and providing flexibility so that what works in that community works. I've seen this a little bit when I was veterans minister and when I did advocacy in the private sector for military families and veterans. The at-risk housing issue where people are couch surfing, have an addiction, they haven't yet become homeless. We need intervention there. We need options for when they are homeless as well, and treatment and harm reduction measures to make sure that we have a suite of services. And so my approach will be really building partnerships as much as possible. I have a shadow minister for housing from the Fraser Valley, Brad Viss, one of our young MPs, and I've asked him to look at not just the affordability challenges we see in the Lower Mainland, but also this homelessness challenge and at-risk challenge. how can we make a smarter based partnership process from Ottawa?
Yeah, as you know, one of the critical issues involving homelessness is that many of the people suffering with it right now are also suffering from addiction issues, trauma issues, and so on. And one proposal that our mayor here in Vancouver has put up, former MP and the NDP, and Mr. Trudeau appears to have some receptivity to it, is the idea of a safe drug supply. Safe drug supply for addicts in this city and elsewhere, of course. Do you favor that?
I don't, because I do think while it's well-intended, and I know Kennedy's well-intended, I think it's bad execution and quite risky. Much like Mr. Trudeau said, the legalization of marijuana would eliminate the supply from criminal sources and non-regulated, non-legal supply. It's actually accelerated. And the biggest fear I have, and something I talk about a lot, particularly in BC, the opioid crisis is a pandemic within a pandemic. In fact, I showed my children the Globe and Mail cover where they had the cover of deaths in the last year, almost all people under 35. It's heartbreaking. The safe supply will create an impression that everything is safe. And with carfentanil and other things, that cannot be assured. And we've seen harm reduction measures have some benefits, but also challenges. So I think we have to eliminate criminal sanctions. I've talked about that for several months. It's a bit of a departure from previous positions the Conservative Party has taken. But we've always said people dealing, pushing, preying on the vulnerable, that's where the criminal measures and sanctions have to be centered to our criminal justice system. But for people that have a substance addiction problem or are vulnerable or others, we have to have compassion being the center of our criminal justice system. So I'm not in favor of criminal sanction or anything like this, but to suggest that just everything being legal will somehow be safer, I actually think runs contrary from our learning with the opioid epidemic. So how can we work again to provide options, to provide harm reduction, which I fully support, but also treatment options, because we need a bundle of services. I've worked on mental health, Kirk, since I left the military, and I had my first experience when our squadron responded to the crash of Swiss Air Flight 111. I've seen how early intervention in any mental health or wellness issue is positive. So we need a suite of options, and some of those should include treatment options, because ultimately we want to reduce harm, but if we can help people get back on a path to wellness, that has to be part of the conversation too. Okay.
You use the word sanctions, and so it reminds me that Canada is in a way sanctioned right now. Government of China, of course, has the two Michaels essentially hostage there. And here we have Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver, who's awaiting the extradition hearing, which now is protracted even more, as you know, in the last few days. But of course, it's all because, in a lot of ways, of our position on Huawei. And the Canadian government has made gestures around supporting or not supporting, but it's unclear about where it actually sits on Huawei in terms of its own technology. Telecommunications companies, of course, have voted and decided they can't have part of it, but that's a very expeditious business decision on their part. There isn't really a clear sense from the government yet about Huawei's technology and 5G. So you're the Prime Minister. What's your view?
Huawei cannot be part of our 5G infrastructure. And anyone with a serious degree of knowledge about how critical 5G will be for our economy, for the Internet of Things economy, knows that you cannot have even the slightest risk of a security breach for that infrastructure that will connect your car, your home, to the power plant, to our financial system. We're the only Five Eyes country, Kirk, that has not made a clear pronouncement on the Huawei issue. In fact, Mr. Trudeau, when it comes to his policy and his approach with the communist government in China, has been out of step with our allies at every stage. In fact, He's been out of step with the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and the Biden administration on Huawei, on technology sale and transfer, and on steel and aluminum transshipment. In fact, Mr. Trudeau's trade deal and Ms. Freeland's allowed Kitamats, some of the greenest aluminum in the world, to be shifted and the dirtiest from China to go into Mexico to build auto parts to hurt both my province and yours. We have to be much smarter. We have to align with the US on security and trade. That's how they talk in Washington. Trade and security are linked. If we do that, I think we can not only secure our economy better, avoid tariffs and disruptions with our largest market, we can get a softwood lumber agreement. I'm quite confident if we leverage what used to be a very privileged position as the Americans' only free trade and domestic homeland security partner. In fact, I was speaking with someone in BC just the other night who has been involved in a variety of the softwood lumber negotiations for Canada in the past. And Canada's not taken us seriously now in Washington, and we have to rectify that. So China is a challenge, but we have to show that our values and our interests are not for sale. And I think if the Five Eyes countries can have a united view with respect to trade, with respect to human rights, the genocide against the Uyghur population, the situation in Hong Kong, I think that is the best way to show the regime in Beijing that you cannot get the benefits of global trade and the rules-based system while flaunting all the underlying principles of it. And there's already this sort of clash underway, and Canada has to be aligned with where our interests, our allies, and our values are.
Do you see a safe path out of this for the two Michaels and for Canada with its relationship with China?
Yes, I do. And I think about the Michaels almost every morning. You know, the Globe and Mail runs the tally of how many days they've been imprisoned as a diplomatic act of hostage taking. Right when it started, I was the foreign affairs critic for the Conservatives, and I asked early intervention from the Prime Minister because I feared, like some other countries had experienced, this was going to be leveraged hard, and the longer it became protracted, the harder it would be to deal with. There were a number of things that we could have done early. The Extradition Act could have allowed the transfer of Ms. Meng to a jurisdiction where the proceeding would have been done faster, fully within our laws and rules, but it would have shown we're trying to expedite it, but we are not going to circumvent our legal system, our criminal justice system. And in fact, China should be having the same serious and responsible criminal justice system. That there is not a criminal justice system in that country right now. And then working with the Americans and other allies, I think showing we were trying to handle it expeditiously, but we weren't going to give in to that sort of hostage-taking negotiation, I think is what we should have done up front. But I think Canadians want to see their safe return. And we also want to not reinforce this bad behavior from Beijing. So we have to have a principled and strong position.
If she's extradited, do you fear that other Canadians will be unsafe in China? When this first broke, Kirk, I asked for the Prime Minister to change the travel advisory to China. Because if you recall, after the two Michaels were taken, there was a teacher from Calgary who was seized. There were two, Mr. Schellenberger, who I believe is from British Columbia, had a sentence changed from a jail sentence to a death sentence. This is what I mean. It's whatever the small group of communist leaders in Beijing want to do. They can rewrite their laws, their international agreements, their criminal system on a whim. And so we said, there's so many Canadians with a presence in both mainland China and Hong Kong that we should have been advising our citizens of the risks of both travel and work, but also trade. There's some famous cases of BC companies who've also been caught up in intractable trade disputes where the regime will intervene. So we should always tell our citizens that it's eyes wide open with China. It's the China as it really is
under communist rule. It's not China or its ancient history and its amazing people. It's a political ideology that is the risk, and it's gotten worse since 2017. And so we should be very forthright in telling Canadians that there's inherent risks there, and for those risks to be minimized, it really will take smart reforms in Beijing that I hope international pressure, including pressure on the Olympics, should be applied by democratic countries. We should demand better.
This week in the provincial budget, we saw an increase in the support for disabled persons in terms of their monthly support. But one of our questioners today wants to know about how a Conservative government would help disabled persons in your plan for economic reform.
Thank you. That's an important question. I'm actually proud to say this is something that our caucus has been talking about for a number of years. We need to work for more opportunities for people with physical and mental disabilities, work with the private sector, work with some groups. There's been Rotary Club and some other groups that have really championed some pilot programs. Pierre Poilievre, our jobs and industry shadow minister a few years ago, had a great private sector bill about more participation in the workforce with Canadians with disabilities. My shadow minister now for future workforce and inclusion is how we're defining it. Raquel Dancho, she's 30 from Manitoba. She's coming up with policies to address this. I think it's not only a win for those Canadians. I've talked to some of the business owners with turnover, with unreliability, with a whole range of things. They generally have better performance from their employees with disabilities. And that early, whether it's a minor accommodation or that adoption of a program, pays huge dividends in the long term. And I've worked on the veteran piece since I left the military, working on veteran employment and transition. There is so much about the purpose of work and having that purpose of being part of a team and being productive that is core to wellness. And so this will be central to us. I think there's a number of other parties on the left right now that are talking about making the CERB permanent or having UBI. How can we have an economic recovery that allows people to live up to their potential, has a recovery and leaves no one behind? So we're going to have some exciting policies on this, as we've had bills in recent years, including from Mr. Poilievre, trying to push this government to do more.
Okay. I'm cognizant of your time here today. We're a few minutes left. I'm going to skip the question on how you get more coverage of the Conservative Party in the media. I think let's just leave that one go. Okay, let's let that go.
As long as I'm getting covered in Cloverdale today, I'll be happy.
Oh, you seem to be. You've got pretty good spread there. But I want to ask a little bit about budget and where you will go in terms of the vote, and then of course whether you think that we're going to be provoked into an election here in the fall or in late spring. What are your views on that?
I get asked that a lot as a new leader in a minority parliament, as you can imagine, Kirk. I've said consistently, we need vaccines and arms first. Vaccines before votes. I know Mr. Trudeau was posturing a couple of months ago to prepare for an election. I think they were using this as an election budget. There's over $100 billion of new spending that is really just a number of targeted sort of pre-election things that will do nothing for securing jobs or productivity, for example. But I really do think that the third wave and the depth of it, which comes from Mr. Trudeau's lack of supply of vaccines, would make it very, very difficult to have a safe and effective election in the short term. British Columbia had one, but it was before first and second waves. New Brunswick and Saskatchewan did that as well. The third wave, because of the variants and because of our low vaccination levels as a country, is the toughest wave, especially in my province, Kirk. Ontario is really quite challenged in the GTA right now. So I don't think in the short term there should be one. I'm very glad to say that Mr. Singh already agreed before the budget that he was going to support the budget or not allow an election to be called. I'm not sure what he'll do. The first two confidence votes, amendments from the Bloc and ourselves, both passed. I don't think there will be a showdown on this budget, but this budget was a major letdown. There's actually no vision beyond September. They're just extending their existing programs and putting a few Band-Aids, and they're offering no vision on how we're going to get people working in all parts of the country. They've waved the white flag of even trying to have any fiscal responsibility over the short term. As I said, Mr. Trudeau's doubling our national debt and projected to triple it. If interest rates go up, Kirk, we will be at risk of a debt crisis in Canada. And I think I'm in politics to make sure that my kids who are 14 and 9 inherit the great country that we all know, that lets a kid from Bowmanville be talking to you in Cloverdale, asking for your support to be the Prime Minister. Pretty middle-class, regular person that's dedicated my life to service. We need to make sure that that great country and those opportunities are there for all of our kids and grandkids. So I think over the next year, there'll be an election. I think, I'm not a betting person, but I don't think there'll be one this spring or summer.
So you feel, though, that you can vote against the budget and not have it inferred that you're after an election?
Well, there's a difference between confidence in Mr. Trudeau. I don't have confidence in Mr. Trudeau. Even in the crisis, they were putting together the We Charity scheme that they closed down Parliament rather than asking a few questions on it. So even in a crisis, there was still special access for insiders. And I really do think this budget is a huge risk. There's the confidence of what Parliament is. A minority Parliament, there's certain measures that are deemed confidence, like the throne speech, like the budget. But as I said, Mr. Singh made his intentions known early. That allows us to make sure that we do our job. We propose alternatives, we challenge the government. Mr. Trudeau doesn't like being challenged, but that's what democracy is. I'm pushing for better. I'm not satisfied to see Canada in 40th or 50th place a few months ago in the vaccine rollout. That's why we're having the third wave as serious as we are. We weren't at a level of vaccination to stop major community spread. So I'm always going to push for better. And at the appropriate time, there might be an opportunity where we said we can't let this go on any further, but we need to make sure the health and well-being of Canadians is first and foremost. And I would hope that all parties agree with that. Yeah.
Listen, we're pretty well run out of time, but I should ask you this one question. You know, you're a former military man, you're dedicated to the services. Are you worried about what you're seeing right now in terms of the crisis at the top?
Absolutely, I'm worried. And quite frankly, the military helped change my life. When I came to Chilliwack and did my basic training, it gave me responsibility. It changed my viewpoint. It allowed me to know what it meant to serve and to give all my all as part of a team. And to see that erosion of trust, particularly women who want to put service to their country first, put potentially their life on the line for their country, to think about how badly they've been failed by senior leaders. But also, I'm sad to say, failed by the minister and the prime minister, who sat on a complaint brought to the ombudsman so that the minister would not have a general administering a program called Operation Honor that was meant on fixing things. They ignored her. That's unacceptable in my view. And I'm quite proud that my MP, Leona Alislav, a veteran herself, a business executive and an MP, has been one of our leads. And I think she is perfectly suited to make sure that we demand better. And I'll tell you, I appreciate Mr. Sajan's service to our country, but I've been profoundly disappointed in his failure of women in uniform.
Okay. Well, listen, we're going over time here. I know you're a busy guy, and I want to now bring aboard. I want to thank you for the hour that you spent with us. I want to bring aboard Tyler Dennis, who's the Cloverdale District Chamber President, who will provide some closing remarks. Thanks a lot, Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Kirk.
I want to start by saying, Kirk, thank you so much for taking the time moderating this event today. We truly appreciate having you there to moderate and ask the questions. So thank you so much for that. And on behalf of the entire chamber, I would like to share our sincerest appreciation and thanks to the Honorable Mr. Erin O'Toole for sharing his valuable time with us today and taking the time to speak with the people of Cloverdale, Clayton, and Campbell Heights, our little corner here down in British Columbia. We truly appreciate you taking that time, answering the questions, and reaching out to us. And we also want to thank Adam Smith, Uptown Business Machine, and Kira Sarah for all your support. And thank you, everybody, for coming on today. And again, thank you so much, Mr. O'Toole. We truly appreciate that.
Thank you. I look forward to the coffee in person next time.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. So we appreciate the day. Stay safe, everybody.
Stay safe. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for letting me do this.
Yeah, Kirk, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I know there's some people, participants are still logging off, so just be aware there are some people still there. And
Yeah,
recording and that. But again, thank you so much. The questions, how you went through them and you watched them and that too. I appreciated that as well. I could see you were like, yep, that's been awesome. That was covered. So thank you.
Yeah, try to get a couple of follow-ups there, and which made it really work, and it was good. All right. Well, look, thanks again.
Thanks so much, Kurt. All the best.
See you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great. Thanks, Tyler.
That's good. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to log off. I'm going to go quickly. I've got a client coming in that, but hey, what was the number? I didn't see the end result on the, I know the participants still got 16 in there, but we had a good number too. So I'm happy. We'll debrief on that. Okay.
We had 77 registered, 55 in the show. So
that's good. I'm happy with it. I'm happy. All right, Scott, I'm going to run out. We'll debrief and we'll talk again. Thanks. If Rebecca's still on the call, thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. And Adam as well. Truly appreciate all that you guys did on that one. All right.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. I'm going to end the session for everyone now.